Hi, my name is Steve Hullfish. I'm an editor and a colorist and an author. I've written two books called The Art and Technique of Color Correction and Color Correction for Video. I worked on the Oprah Winfrey Show for 10 years as an editor. I've worked for Bill Curtis, Investigative Reports, cut features. Today, though, we're not talking about editing, we're talking about color correcting. And color correcting is one of those things that can really add value to your projects. You don't want to just cut something together and leave it the way it is. You really want to be able to do color correction to make those images look fantastic. So what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about how to do color correction, and some of what we have to talk about is a little bit of color theory. And the color theory is actually very simple, all right? What you need to know about the color theory to be able to do color correction is that when you combine red, green, and blue in equal amounts, you get white. All right, that's at the high level. If you combine red, green, and blue in equal amounts at the low level, you get pure black. And even red, green, and blue amounts in the middle is kind of a gray. You get a pure gray, all right? And you think, well, why do I need to know that? Well, one of the main monitors, one of the main displays that colorists use is this display right here. It's the RGB parade. And an RGB parade is simply red, green, and blue waveform monitor in a parade strung out together. And because, as I mentioned, that red, green, and blue in equal amounts makes black or makes white, if the black on your red, green, and blue are the same height, the same level like this black is, this little black dot right here is the same thing as that, and that on our RGB parade waveform monitor. If they're even, if they're equal across the horizontal plane, that means they're balanced. That means it's nice, there's no blue, there's no red in it, it's pure black. Same thing on the highlights. This white chip here and this white chip here, they're these chips right here. And it looks white to me. It looks pretty white. It seems like it's well balanced. But if I look at the RGB parade, you can actually see that the red channel is higher than the green channel, which is higher than the blue channel. And what that tells you is that this is actually, the highlights are kind of reddish yellow in color, all right? And that's not good, so we're going to fix those. I'm going to show you how to fix those. We're going to go into, this monitor here is showing us Adobe Speedgrade CS6, and I'm into this little control here that shows, this is allowing me to see my shadows, my midtones, and my highlights, and I'm able to control them. And as you can see, the shadow control, midtones controls, and the highlight controls have red, green, and blue controls. And very intuitively, they match the red, green, and blue waveform monitors. So if I come over here and I start adjusting, bringing down the red shadow control, you'll see that actually I got to click on this button over here to unlock those. There we go. If I click on the red shadow control, then what this is going to do is going to pull just my red channel down in the shadows, and I just want that black chip, that's this black chip here, I want that to just kiss the bottom line because that's supposed to be black. Now I'm going to go to my green channel, and I'm going to pull that down too and make that even with the red channel and also down to 0. And I'm going to do the same thing with blue. I'm just going to drag that down and have that kiss right there at the bottom. And now we've got a nice balanced black. It's low, it's right where it should be, it's nice and rich. But now look up here at the highlights. Red is way too high compared to green. So I'm just going to drag the red channel up like this until it kind of kisses this 700 or 100% line. I'm going to do the same thing for green, like that. And I'm going to do the same thing for blue. I'm just going to drag this up like this, right there. And by having those equal all the way across, we have a very pure white, all right? Also, by having this in my midtones even across here, I have a very pure gray. And if I click on the 0 button, I've got a keyboard down here that's controlling Speedgrade. And when you press the 0 on the numeric keypad on Speedgrade, it shows you what the shot did look like. And then if I let go, it shows me what the shot looks like with my correction on it. So before, now you can kind of see that it's kind of hazy gray, hazy red color, and also not real rich. And my correction looks nice and rich. The blacks look rich, and I've got this beautiful balanced look. So like that was an easy one, right? That was pretty easy to do. So now let's try one with a little more difficulty. I did not reset this from one of my previous corrections, so I'm just going to reset this. And this is what the shot really looks like. Very blue, and You can also see that blueness in my waveform, my RGB parade. You can see that the blue channel is the highest of the channels compared to green and compared to red. So that tells you the same thing that you're using your eyes to see. Yeah, this is really blue. My vector scope also tells me the same thing about this blue color, that in a vector scope, black and white and a balanced color is right in the middle. And yet all of this trace, the green squiggly stuff here, all the trace is pushed down towards blue cyan. So even the vector scope is telling me that I have a very blue image, and my RGB parade is telling me the same thing. For me to fix this, I'm just going to go over here on this on Speedgrade. First thing, I always balance my blacks first. So I'm going to grab my red channel. My red channel is already perfect, actually. It's already sitting right where it should on the bottom of the zero line here. So now I'm going to pull my green channel down so my black just kisses the bottom line. See, I'm trying to, this chip is the same as that chip right there on all three of these. So I need to get these balanced so that there's no pollution of any color in them. And when they're balanced like that, that black is perfect. But my highlights are still not looking good. So now I'm going to go to my highlights on my red channel. You can see how low this is compared to my blue channel. So I need to pull this all the way up. I'm trying to get these things, these chips here are the same as these two white chips here. I'm trying to pull those all the way up so they hit the 700 millivolt or 100% line. Green, same thing, almost where they should be. And now the blue's a little tricky. Do you see in the blue this very bright, tight line right here? That is because the blue channel has clipped. The other channels are fine. The blue channel has clipped, and that changes the relationship of all the colors in my highlights between red, green, and blue. So I can't really trust the blue channel anymore in my highlights because it's all those colors have gotten mixed up. So what I'm really going to worry about is my gamma or my midtones, and I need to balance these shapes, and these shapes. Those all have to be the same position across here in order to have the gray be balanced and clean. So green looks a little bit higher than red, so what I'm going to do is come over here to my gammas, and I'm going to pull green down, and you just see green by itself in the middle comes down a little bit, so this matches this. Blue is still very, very high, so I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to just pull it way, 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 way down. And when I'm pulling that down, you can also see the vector scope slides from very blue, here's blue, and here's yellow. It slides over, and when it's right in the middle, that's when I know I'm good. Also, I know I'm balanced when these three things are equal across here. And if I go too far yellow, then blue goes below, the vector scope goes towards yellow, and I have a very yellow color in my grays here. So I want to go back so these things are balanced. So these are all equal, and my vector scope shows right in the center. And if I hit the 0 mark, you see that's the color correction that I had before, and that's the color correction that I've created. So that's pretty good. The next thing I need to do is I'm going to do a color correction on an actual shot, right? Nobody color corrects chip charts, they color correct footage. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on this shot here. This is from a movie called Blue Like Jazz. And I'm going to slide down here to the end of the shot. It's a big, long, steady cam shot, and it ends up on our hero. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a couple of things that are in the image to help me balance the shot properly. One of the things I'm going to use, the first thing I'm going to use, is he looks like he's wearing a black jacket. And so that will let me balance my blacks just as if I was doing those chip charts. So the way I did the chip charts, I just found black and I brought them down to 0. I'm going to do the same thing with his jacket. So he's on the left side of the screen. So on the left side of each one of these waveforms is that same black jacket. So I think that shape, and that shape is the black jacket. So I'm going to pull my red channel down so the black jacket just kisses the bottom 0 display, just like I did it with the chip charts. And I'm going to pull this down so that's the same. I'm going to pull this down so that is the same. So now we've kind of got them all lined up. And if we press the 0 button again, you can see I've kind of fixed it. The black is a little bit more rich. than it was, but we still don't have a great correction. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our highlights and we're going to fix our highlights. Notice that the highlights are only at about 600 millivolts. You know, that'd be like 70, 85% maybe. So we need to get those up to 100%. You don't have to get all images up to 100%, but I'm looking out this window and there's some pretty bright sky in there, and so I'm thinking that definitely this belongs at 100. So I'm going to take my reds all the way up to 100. I'm going to take my greens all the way up to 100. And I'm going to take my blues all the way up to 100 like that. So now if I hit 0, that's my correction. It still doesn't look good. And what I need is I need something in the midtones of the picture to be able to determine kind of where that skin tone is. I think that this gray wall behind his head, I think that's probably either perfect gray or maybe, you know, this is public transportation, right? This is shot in Portland, Oregon on a train. I think that's either pure gray or maybe it's like that kind of off-white yellowish cream color that you'd probably see in public transportation. Remember what I said about pure gray, right? It's equal amounts of red, green, and blue. So if we can figure out where this pure gray is of this image up here, then we can match it just like we did with blacks and whites. Well, this is in the middle, absolute middle of the shot. So in the middle of my vector, or middle of my waveform monitor, there's this funny little W shape. I think that W shape is basically this wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match my reds to my greens to my blues. You can see that red is kind of low, green is up high, and so is blue. I want to get them all to match. So I'm going to bring my gammas, my midtones, I'm going to bring that midtone down so that that little bird shape, that little W shape, matches from red to green. And I'm going to pull down blues, and I'm going to have the blues match the reds and the greens too. So now this shape is the same across all three channels. And now if I look at my correction, that's my correction, looks pretty good. And if I hit that, you can see, wow, I made some real improvements, but I still think he's a little bit pasty looking. And so maybe I'm wrong about this being gray. Maybe this is really kind of yellow. Well, how do you add yellow if the only channels you have are red, green, and blue? Well, if you look at the vector scope gives you your answer. The vector scope is showing me that here's red, green, and blue, and in between red and green is yellow. So the vector scope is telling me red and green make yellow, green and blue make cyan, blue and red make magenta. And the other things you have to understand is that the opposite of each color is on the other side of the vector scope from it. So yellow is the opposite of blue, magenta is the opposite of green, and red is the opposite of cyan. Where does that get? Well, if I'm trying to get yellow, I want to add yellow, I can either add red and green in equal amounts, or I can subtract blue, and that will get me yellow as well. So I'm going to subtract blue. That's the easiest thing. I'll have to grab one slider. So I'm going to make the blue channel, this W area, I'm going to make that blue channel lower than the other two. And I'm actually looking also just at my shot, trying to see how far I can take that. And now this wall is getting really pretty yellow, and his skin tone is getting very yellow, and even outside is getting kind of yellow, so I've taken it too far. That's okay. That's the way color correction works. It's like focusing a camera. You got to go a little bit one way, you got to come a little bit back. It's okay that I went too far. I'll just go back until, yeah, his skin tones look pretty good there. That wall, who knows what color it is, it's probably yellow. That looks pretty good. And if I cut back and forth, you go, wow, that's a pretty good correction there. So that's kind of how to use the RGB waveform and the vector scope to get into a correction. Now I want to show you something. This is really what separates the men from the boys when it comes to color correction, is matching. Matching is something that's pretty difficult to do unless you've got this capture button on the WFM 5200 on actually all Tektronix displays, at least the 7000, the 8000 as well. Here's a shot. This is from my hometown of Chicago. It's the Art Institute. This building is kind of a sandstone, yellowish color. That's actually pretty accurate. And let's say the director wants me to match this shot with a shot later in the day, this shot. Wow, that's a lot different. These two shots right here. That one is going to try to match that one. How can I get that to happen? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the capture button on the WFM 5200. Before I kind of explain that, let me talk a little bit about presets. for me to get to what I need to get to, I'm going to hit the preset button on my WFM 5200. This is mine. I love it dearly. And this is the preset button right here. And down here, I've got a bunch of different presets I created. They're not factory presets. I made them because they're the way I want to be able to do color correction. They give me the displays that I want to see at the touch of a button. It's scales and the scaling or magnification, the position, the exact combinations of two displays. They're the way I like to work. You can set them up any way you want. If you like the way I do it, these presets are actually on the Tektronix website. Someplace you search around, you'll be able to find them, but you can get my presets if you want them. Otherwise, make your own. They're very easy to make. All these names that are at the bottom, those are all the names that I named things. You can name them different if you want to. I am going to do what's called, I call it match cap. And so I'm going to hit this little match capture button right there, and it gets me a full screen. This screen and this screen are identical. They're matching. A full screen RGB parade. I'm going to get rid of the little lion on there by hitting the thumbnail button. I get the full screen on the lion. I'm going to change in my Adobe Speedgrade over to the lion that I want to match to, the good looking lion, that gold color, yellow color building. That's what we're looking at right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the capture button on the front of the WFM 5200, and when I do that, you'll see that the display, the trace, the squiggly stuff in here, now it looks, before it looked green, now it's kind of yellow-green. And the reason why that is when I hit capture, I've grabbed a still, basically, of that shot that I want to match to, that lion. And that's pretty cool, but it doesn't really help me. But what you need to do now is, on my Speedgrade, I'm going to jump to further down. I'm going to jump to the shot of the blue lions. Now the blue lions, the green trace here is showing me the live feed out of my Speedgrade software. It could be out the live feed out of any color correction software. It could even be a live feed out of a camera that's plugged right into the back. You could use this in whatever you want to use it from. But green is showing me the live trace, and gold is showing me the captured frozen trace. What good does that do me? Well, if I want to match these two shots, all I have to do is match these funny shapes that are in the trace. See how the green trace is so much lower than the yellow trace up here? Or here, the yellow trace is so much lower than the green trace? All I got to do is match those traces. So I'm going to do that really quickly, and you can watch me. Here I'm going to pull down my red shadows, and I'm going to look at my red, I'm sorry, I got to click that button right there. My mistake. I'm going to grab my red shadows, and I'm just going to drag them up and down like focusing a camera, and I want to make this little shape in the green trace match that shape in the yellow trace. And when I got it, I'm going to leave it right there. Now I'm going to go to my greens, do the same thing, move these up and down like focusing a camera, and I'm just going to set that shape over that shape, and I'm done. Now I'm going to do the same thing with blues, or I mean RGB, yeah, with blues, and I'm going to match this shape with this shape, just a little lower. That's good. So now I got my shadows matched. Now what I'm going to do is match my highlights. So I'm going to grab my red highlight control, and you're going to look up here, and I'm going to match this trace with this trace. So I got to drag that way up there. That's good right there. Now I'm going to go into my green trace. That's pretty close actually, but I need to come up a bit. And my blue trace actually has to come down. I got to match the green trace with the yellow trace, or gold, I think they like to call it. Looks pretty good. Now, you know what? My red trace, or my red, when I pulled up red so much, it also pulled up my shadows in my red. So I need to pull my red shadows down again a little bit so they match. And I've got to bring my red trace then back up. And maybe I've got to, the gammas look pretty good. So now you can see the little shapes, all these little squiggles, they all match between my different cameras. So now I'm going to go into my capture button, turn off my gold capture. Now I'm back to just regular green. I'm going to hit preset on my WFM 5200, and then I'm going to hit my standard preset, which shows me RGB, vector, and then the image down here. This is a pretty decent color correction, if I hit 0 on my speed grade, you can see that that's where I started from and that's what I corrected. That's not bad, right? But what we really want to know is whether I matched the two shots. Did I match the lion perfectly? In speed grade, you can see I'm parked over the blue lion right now. I'm going to move back here to the gold line and we'll click. Matching shot happen over here. 3, 2, 1. That's my match. That is a darn close match. And I did it all using the capture button on the WFM 5200. A great, great little button to try to use. A couple of things I want to show you also about the WFM 5200 is some displays that are completely unique to Tektronix. They patented them. They came up with the idea and they patented them. This is called the diamond display. Diamond display is a display that is, I could actually bump this up to full screen if I wanted to. The diamond display is two diamonds on top of each other. The way that this is best used is for setting up a camera. A balancing camera is a great use of the diamond display. It's a little confusing looking if you've never seen one of these things. The way it works is blacks are right in the middle of the two diamonds, right here. That's black. Whites are at the top of this diamond and the bottom of this diamond. That's it. And then the colors are a little bit interesting to figure out. Green is on this side of this diamond and this diamond. Red is on this side of the bottom diamond, and blue is displayed in this quadrant right here of this triangle. And so, but all you really need to know is that black, white, and gray go right up the middle. And so if you got a balanced image, you're looking at like a plumb line from top to bottom. If I were to grab my red highlight on this camera and pull it, you'll see that my highlight, remember I said highlights are at the top and bottom, my highlight in my red channel is now going red, and I slide it the other way, my red highlight, and now it's going green. And if I want to get it balanced, I just bring it back there, and I'm done. So that is that. And you think even for a regular shot, like you know, here's our guy here. That's a good example. This is another example. You can even see in a regular image of a human being in a regular setting that if it's balanced, it goes up and down in the middle. There's obviously stuff that goes to either side. You know, if we choose this, this is the lion over here. There's stuff that goes off to the red and off to the green, but largely it goes straight up and down in the middle. There's a lot of green here, but that's this green lion. But basically, the shot is balanced. So that's the diamond display. The next thing I want to show you is kind of the complement to that diamond display is the spearhead. And what I like to do is I like to show the spearhead display along with. Now, why do I want to show a spearhead display with a vector scope? Well, it gives you a great three-dimensional view of color space. I want to show you a little bit of a animation. Take a look at this animation, a color space. Color space is like two cones, and they come together. Highlights are at the very top of one cone. Right? You got highlights at the top of one cone, you got shadows at the bottom of the other cone, and saturation spreads out in the middle. Right? So that is a representation of RGB color space. White's up here, black's here, saturation's out at the sides. Now, if I rotate that cone so we're looking like a top, like a children's top, where I'm looking at it from the top, that is a vector scope. That is a representation of a vector scope. That's color space. Saturation is at the outside, unsaturated is on the inside. That's what we're looking at. If we take that cone and again, the child's top, and we turn it on its side, this is basically this. And if I click on one of the chip charts with some color in it, you can actually see, right, with the spearhead display, black is at the bottom, white's at the top, and saturation goes out to the edges like this. Saturation goes out this way. Actually, kind of goes up like this, but saturation goes out away from black and white. This is unsaturated here. Saturated's out like this. On a vector scope, saturation goes out to the edges and unsaturated is in. We have no way on a vector scope of knowing what black and white is. There's no luminance, there's no way to display luminance on a vector scope. So these are a nice complement because this shows the view looking down and this shows the view looking across, basically. So I like these two displays together, and this is a display that you won't see anywhere else but on a Tektronix scope. The next thing I want to show you is a really, really valuable display, which is also only on Tektronix, and that is the Luma Qualified Vector Scope. So you guys know what a vector scope is, right? Here's our vector scope. It's got black and white in the middle. Saturation goes out to the edges. But if I'm going to start balancing something, I'm like, oh, I'm trying to balance this, I can kind of get lost of what is black and what is white. It's very hard to see because they're layered on top of each other. So what I would love to see is a vector scope that shows me just highlights or just shadows. And believe it or not, Tektronix came up with this. It's called a Luma Qualified Vector Scope. And you can make your Luma Qualified Vector Scope whatever you want. It could be you just show the mid-tones or something. But for me, for a colorist, what it's really valuable to do is the Luma Qualified Vector, it allows you to choose the range that the vector scope is displaying. So for me, on my Luma Qualified Vector, you can see my display is from 766, which is way illegal, super bright, down to 629. So I'm looking at about the top 10% of my luminance channel is being displayed on this vector scope. On this vector scope, I'm looking from below legal all the way up to about the top or the bottom 10% of my shadows at about 80 millivolts. So those numbers don't even mean anything. They don't matter necessarily. You can set them to whatever you want. If you like my settings, please go ahead and use them. Otherwise, basically this is my shadow vector scope and this is my highlight vector scope. They don't look like vector scopes, and the reason why they kind of don't look like vector scopes is because when I have my preset, I want them to be zoomed all the way in. I don't want to have to push extra buttons where I go to this and then I have to add plus 5x gain. I don't want to have to do that. I just want one button that does one thing. But it makes it kind of hard to understand. So I'm going to move up to this. When you put the blue line around the vector scope like this, or blue line around a display, you're able to change it. So now I can hit gain, and now you can see it's a regular vector scope. Now I hit the thumbnail button again. That takes me over to this display, and I can hit gain again, and now both of them are at 1x normal gain. So they look like vector scopes, right? The difference is this one's a shadow vector scope, this one's essentially a highlight vector scope. The cool thing about that is my trackball display, that now these things correspond to the shadow trackball and my highlight trackball, and I can dial in right, if I move my trackball right, if I move my trackball left, the vector scope follows it exactly. So dialing in a perfect white, or this is shadow, a perfect shadow is very easy. Highlight control, dialing in a perfect highlight is also very easy because those balls correspond to these vector scopes exactly. And you're able to dial in a balance perfectly, very easily. Final thing that I want to show you is secondary color correction. So I'm going to switch back my preset to my standard RGB parade and a vector scope. And we've got this scene from a movie called Blue Like Jazz. It's very cool. It's like a big rock and roll scene, a party scene at a college. And right now it's a little muddy and boring. It's supposed to be a party, right? So if I were to pull the saturation out of this thing, so it's desaturated, now it looks serious. It looks like a funeral, right? We don't want that. We want it to look like a party. So we're going to add a whole mess of saturation. Excellent. That is the artistic vision that I have for this shot. Lots of saturation, lots of energy, lots of excitement. The problem with this shot now, if I look over here on my vector scope, I can see that I've gone out of my legal limits for my vector scope. I need to be inside of these targets to be legal, and my cyan color is completely illegal. So do I move my saturation down on, do I move my saturation of the entire thing and ruin my artistic vision? No. All I want to do is move the cyan saturation right here and pull that back. In order to do that, I'm going to do what's called secondary color correction. Secondary color correction is a color correction that only applies to a part of the image, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to take I'm sorry. I'm going to take my, there we go. I'm going to take my saturation. I'm going to do a secondary color correction. On the speed grade, I'm going to click right here on the plus S button, and that gets me a secondary layer. This is Adobe product, and it's very layer-based like After Effects. So now I've added a layer of secondary color correction. Now I'm going to click on this plus eyedropper button, and that allows me to come over on my waveform monitor, actually on the display itself, and click on one of these lights and just kind of drag around on that light, just like picking, like if you're going to pick a chroma key or something, and it creates a qualification, in other words, a selection, an HSL selection. So what I'm telling the computer to do is I'm trying to identify a color, and that's that cyan color that's illegal. So I want to identify that cyan color, and this is what the eyedropper picked. It's not a great qualification. So now what I'm going to do is, I've got this qualification. I'm going to come over here to gray out and click on color gray. And what this is telling me is anything that's gray on this screen is not going to be color corrected. Well, right now everything is color corrected, so my qualification that I did with the eyedropper couldn't have been too good. So I'm going to open up that qualification a little bit. A qualification is just a selection, and I think the main problem is that there's no saturation, and we need saturation. There you go. Start to see these white dots and the blue dots. You can see the lights now. And now anything that's white or color in here, that's what we're going to be color correcting. All right, that's what we're going to be grading when I come out. So now I want to go back to my full color image, and now only in those spots that weren't gray on the previous image, I'm going to pull the saturation down, and you actually see the saturation coming out of my, there we go, come on. You can see the saturation coming out. I need to grab my qualification, make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And so now what you're able to see is that I was able to pull the saturation just out of those kind of rock and roll cyan lights and pull the saturation just back on them. All the rest of the saturation stays completely saturated, very exciting, and I've been able to make my director happy and the QC guys happy thanks to my WFM 5200. That is my color correction seminar. I hope it helped you, and I hope that you can see the value of a WFM 5200 in your workflow. Thanks.